Act 5. Mrs. Higgins's drawing room, the following morning summary. Mrs. Higgins is in her drawing room when her maid enters and tells her that Pickering and Higgins are downstairs calling the police. Mrs. Higgins sends the maid upstairs to inform Eliza that the men are here and that she should not come until she is called. Higgins enters and explains that he is anxious that Eliza has left. He cannot find anything and now has nobody to remind him of his appointments. Mrs. Higgins scolds her son for calling the police as if Eliza were a lost parcel. The maid announces the coming of Mr. Doolittle, who enters in fancy clothes. Doolittle claims that Higgins has ruined his happiness. Higgins says that this is impossible because he only gave him £5 and because he has had only 2 conversations with him. Doolittle explains that Higgins wrote a letter to a man named Ezra D. Wannefeller, saying that Doolittle was the most original moralist in England, and the man died and left his millions to Doolittle to show that the Americans do not regard class in the same way that the English do. Doolittle says that he is miserable after being made a gentleman. Everybody asks him for money, and he does not have the nerve to abandon his new wealth and station. Mrs. Higgins says that at least he now can provide for his daughter. Higgins objects to this idea, saying that he bought her by the £5 he had given to Doolittle. Mrs. Higgins reveals that Eliza is upstairs, having come upset very early in the morning. Mrs. Higgins blames them for not admiring Eliza or telling her she did a good job. When Eliza comes down, she looks self-confident and very much at home. She uses the genteel accents that Higgins has taught her. Higgins is furious and claims that he has made her what she is. Pickering assures Eliza that he does not think of her as just an experiment, and she expresses her gratitude to him for everything, especially for teaching manners to her, adding that Higgins could not have taught her such manners. Eliza says that the difference between a lady and a flower girl is not in anything that she does, but in how she is treated. Pickering always treated her like a lady, whereas Higgins has treated her like dirt. Higgins responds that he treats everyone like dirt. Doolittle tells his daughter that he is marrying her stepmother. Doolittle is nervous, and he asks Pickering to come to help see him through the wedding. Mrs. Higgins decides to go as well. Leaving Higgins and Eliza alone, Eliza says that she will not come back because Higgins only wants her to pick up his slippers and the like. Higgins says that he cannot change his own manners. He says he treats everyone as if they were of the lower class. When Eliza says that she can do without Higgins, Higgins says that he needs to determine if he can do without her, since he has grown accustomed to having her around. Eliza claims that he should not have taught her anything because it only leads to trouble, but Higgins claims that all creation leads to trouble. Eliza reveals to him that Freddie is infatuated with her and writes her letters every day. She says that she participated in the experiment because she had come to care for Higgins, and all she wanted was a little kindness, had not forgotten the social and economic gaps between them. She says that she will marry Freddie or become a teacher of phonetics to assert her independence. Higgins finds her spirit to be attractive and says that she is no longer a woman but a tower of strength. He suggests that she live with him and Colonel Pickering, the 3 of them together as bachelors. Mrs. Higgins returns dressed for the wedding, and she takes Eliza with her. Higgins asks her to run his errands for him, including one to buy some cheese and ham. She says a final goodbye to him, and he seems confident that she will follow his command. The onstage drama ends, and Shaw tells us, in narration, that it was proper for the story to have the normal happy ending of similar stories because it was impossible for Higgins and Eliza to get married. The age difference between them was over 20 years. Eliza has finally gained her independence, and she wasn't ready to bear Higgins' rudeness anymore. Eliza recognizes Higgins as destined to be a bachelor and that she marries Freddie instead. With a gift from Colonel Pickering, Eliza opens up a flower shop. Freddie is not very practical, and he and Eliza have to take classes in bookkeeping to make their business a success. But they do make it a success, and they live a fairly comfortable life. Questions and answers. 1. Why was Higgins upset? He was disappointed that Eliza had escaped. He got accustomed to her and became more dependent on her than to run his own business without her. 2. Why did Mrs. Higgins blame Higgins and Pickering for calling the police? She blamed them for giving the girl's name to the police, as if she was a thief or a lost parcel, whereas she had all the right to leave when she pleased. 3. Describe Doolittle's appearance in Act 5. Doolittle appears brilliantly dressed in a new fashionable coat, with white waistcoat, gray trousers, and leather shoes. 4. How did Doolittle get the money? In a silly joke, Higgins had written to an American millionaire that Alfred Doolittle was the most original moralist in England. As a result, the man left Doolittle a share in his wealth when he died. 5. What is the difference between Eliza, the flower girl, and Eliza as a lady of society? As a flower girl, she used bad language, and she never controlled her feelings or behavior. She spoke wrongly and badly because she didn't know the proper language to use. As a lady, she learnt to use good language and to behave properly as well. She said that Higgins was the one who taught her the language, but it was Colonel Pickering who taught her the manners. 6. Why was the main reason for which Eliza refused to live with Higgins and Pickering? All that she wanted was kind treatment and consideration. However, Higgins never treated her with respect, and he said he wasn't ready to do. 7. Why was Eliza grateful to Mr. Pickering? She was grateful to Pickering because he didn't treat her as an experiment. He always treated her like a duchess, even when she was a flower girl. 8. In what way was Alfred Doolittle's life different after he had money from it when he hardly had any? Before he had money, Doolittle led a free, happy life with no worries about anything or anyone. He used to go to people and ask for money if he needed any. After he had money, he had to live for others under the umbrella of the middle-class morality. People came to him for money. Before he had 2 or 3 relatives, but when he became rich, he had a lot of them. 9. But I can't find anything. I don't know what appointments I've got. Comment Higgins said this to his mother when she said it was Eliza's right to leave whenever she liked. The above words show how Higgins got more dependent on Eliza. 10. See here. Do you see this? You done this. Comment Doolittle said this to Higgins when he came to his mother's house. Doolittle was a totally different person now. He's become a rich middle-class gentleman. However, he didn't like his new style of life and blamed it all on Higgins. 11. You have all the luck. You have. I ain't found her, but she'll find me quick enough now after what you done to me. Comment. Doolittle said this to Higgins when he knew that Eliza had escaped from Higgins's house. Instead of blaming Higgins for treating his daughter badly, Doolittle thought it was better for Higgins that he had lost Eliza. 12. Done to me, ruined me, destroyed my happiness, tied me up and delivered me into the hands of middle-class morality. Comment Doolittle said this to Mrs. Higgins when she asked him what her son had done to him. Doolittle became a rich middle-class gentleman due to a letter of recommendation from Higgins to an American millionaire. 13. It's making a gentleman of me that I object to. Who asked him to make a gentleman of me? Comment Doolittle said this to Pickering. Doolittle, he's become a rich middle-class gentleman. He hated this change and blamed Higgins for ruining his life. 14. Nonsense. He can't provide for her. He shan't provide for her. She doesn't belong to him. I paid him £5 for her. Comment Higgins said this when Mrs. Higgins said that Doolittle can provide for his daughter now that he became rich enough. Higgins was angry and claimed that Doolittle didn't have the right to take his daughter as he had sold her to him for £5. 15. You didn't thank her, or pet her, or admire her, or tell her how splendid she'd been. Comment, Mrs. Higgins said this to Pickering and her son when she blamed them for their bad treatment to Eliza after the party. She showed them how selfish and rude they were with her. 16. Let us put on our best Sunday manners for this creature that we pick her out of the mud. Comment Higgins said this to Pickering when Mrs. Higgins asked her son to behave well when Eliza comes to speak with him about a solution to the problem. 17. I tell you I have created this thing out of the squashed cabbage leaves of Covent Garden. Comment Higgins said this to his mother, who blamed him for speaking harshly and rudely to Eliza when she came down to meet him. Higgins never changed his attitude towards Eliza as a dirty flower girl. 18. Will you drop me altogether now that the experiment is over? Eliza said this to Colonel Pickering, ignoring Higgins's rudeness to her when she came downstairs to talk to them. Eliza was determined not to go back with them to Higgins's house. 19. But it was from you that I learnt really nice manners, and that is what makes one a lady, isn't it? Eliza said this to Colonel Pickering. She thanked him for his nice treatment to her. She declared that Higgins had taught her how to talk, but Pickering taught her how to behave as a good-mannered lady. 20. The difference between a lady and a flower girl is not how she behaves, but how she's treated. Eliza said this to Colonel Pickering. She thanked him for his nice treatment to her, saying that his nice and genteel treatment to her made a lady out of her. She meant that without Pickering, the experiment would never have succeeded. 21. I have forgotten my own language and can speak nothing but yours. Eliza said this to Colonel Pickering. She meant that she had become a different person, and she had forgotten her old bad language. She was unable to retreat to her former personality. 22. Let her find out how she can get on without us. She will relapse into the gutter in 3 weeks without me at her elbow. Higgins said this to Colonel Pickering. In fact, he was addressing Eliza in an indirect way. Higgins was shocked by Eliza's new confident and determined personality. 23. You want me back only to pick up your slippers and put up with your tempers and fetch and carry for you. Eliza said this to Higgins when he begged her to come back. Eliza was determined not to go back because she realized that Higgins was unable to treat her kindly. 24. I can do without anybody. I have my own soul, my own spark of divine fire, but I shall miss you. Higgins said this, Eliza who had challenged him that he depended much on her and can't do without her. It was true that Higgins got used to her presence around, but he was too arrogant to confess it. 25. You were a fool. I think a woman fetching a man's slippers is a disgusting sight. Did I ever fetch your slippers? Higgins said this, Eliza. All that Eliza wanted was a promise from Higgins to treat her nicely and kindly as she wished. She reminded him of how she cared about him and used to fetch his slippers for him. 26. Freddie Hill writes to me 2 and 3 times a day, sheets and sheets. Eliza said this to Higgins when he suggested that she might marry Pickering and live with them. Eliza said the above words to show him that she was desired enough by men of her age to accept that strange marriage. 27. In short, you want me to be as infatuated about you as Freddie? Higgins said this Eliza when she told him about Freddie writing letters to her. Higgins thought that Eliza wanted him to be in love with her, but Eliza told him that all that she wanted was a little kindness and respect. 28. I'll marry Freddie. I will, as soon as he's able to support me. Eliza said this to Higgins. She wanted to assure him that she had other choices than submitting to his bad treatment. 29. I'm not going to have my masterpiece thrown away on Freddie. Higgins said this to Eliza when she declared that would marry Freddie. Higgins refused this. 30. If I can't have kindness, I have independence. Eliza said this to Higgins. She wanted to assure him that she was determined to live as a respected lady, not as a worthless maid under his feet. 31. I'll advertise it in the papers that your duchess is only a flower girl that you taught, and that she'll teach anybody to be a duchess, just the same in 6 months for 1,000 guineas. Eliza said this to Higgins. She was determined to have her own independent life, either by marrying Freddie or by working as a phonetic teacher. She threatened him to use his methods to teach other people and earn her living. 32. I said I'd make a woman of you, and I have. I like you like this. Higgins said this to Eliza. She challenged him and declared that she will go on her life independently. In saying the above words, Higgins wasn't proud of Eliza as an independent person, he was proud of his creation.